Hi, I'm President of Collard for YouTube, joined by Patrick McCray, Gordon. Guys, how are you?
We're good. We're good.
I'm a human screensaver. I'm great. I'm great. Rebecca, thank you. I'm
Patrick,
fantastic.
we didn't record what Patrick was saying here a bit ago. You were talking about the Leviathan.
There's a lot of litigation if we had.
I know.
So yeah. What about what I said?
About how they were trying to take over parallel time, maybe.
Yeah, the gangs. It was horrible. No, Gordon had an interesting theory. He was talking about the Judah Zachary endgame theory,
Right.
which is 1995, which I think we're all in agreement about. And and that led me to my weird Master Dark Shadows theory, which is odd because it involves two of my least favorite storylines on the show. But I mean, I like every storyline on the show, so it's least among equals. But both Parallel Time and the Leviathans. And I think maybe I come up with these wacky theories because I want them to make the show make more sense to me, which may be a fool's errand. But the idea, I started thinking about this week because now with the day book, which I always theoretically write, I'm into Parallel Time. And that means we just got done with the Leviathans, and they're both very fresh in my mind. And I keep coming back to what is the utility of Parallel Time? What's going on? And something occurred to me, and it's that because I've always been mad at Parallel Time for not having enough goatees and sashes and daggers and good mirror universe type stuff. And then two things occurred to me. A, it's called Parallel Time, not perpendicular time. It is a companion. It's not creating conflict. So that gives it a strangely different leeway. It doesn't have to be a diametrical opposite. The other thing about it is that its main divergence is that magic works differently. They don't really. You see, he's fled, but they don't really refer to vampires. So that is one of the reasons Willie is so fascinated with Barnabas, or William is so fascinated with Barnabas. And even though there's a book on witchcraft, nobody really does spells. And, Damon Edwards is, I guess, kind of a ghost. And that's the closest, parallel we have. But it's a very different sort of magic. I mean, when Barnabas is encountering this Angelique, she operates under completely different rules. And I get the idea that our Angelique would just, go through like shit through a goose. There was no contest whatsoever. But I thought, okay, so what's the nature of this magic? Well, a lot of the nature of this magic is this bizarre, occult scientific method of extending life. And what is that but trying to create a type of master race that defies death? Who's creating a master race? The Leviathans, which, by the way, is not the first attempt at a master race. The first attempt at a master race is, of course, Nicholas Blair, picking up where Eric Lang left off. And so this theme of creating a better human, an occult human, is a theme in Dark Shadows. I mean, it runs from 1968 on to the end. So in that, what if, because they come up at the same time, what if the parallel time room is very intentionally a portal created by the Leviathans into what? Into a different world that they're going to colonize and take over. What are they using this world for? They're stealing the building blocks of our reality to reshape and reform into something else that Jeb will be able to take over. Jeb, another created human. I mean, if there's any character in all of Dark Shadows who could have sort of worked for the Leviathans from the inside, have been really valuable, it would have been Timothy Stokes, the sleazy mustachioed one. I'm ripping.
Well, what's interesting about that is with the Leviathan, you sort of with them, you sort of had to have a starting point because where did they first meet Barnabas? Back in 1897. Then when they come back, well,
sort of.
1795. Sorry, when they come back, when they come back with him, they're not. Then that's when they're building their foundation in the present day. So you could ask, well, why are they laying a foundation here? What's so special about our normal time here? Well,
you mean at Collinwood?
Well, right. Like, okay.
It's a chicken and egg thing. Maybe Collinwood is built on the site of the Leviathan altar,
Right.
rather than the Leviathan altar appearing at Collinwood.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, think of it as a Quatermass in the pit situation.
Right. That's sort of something I was trying to get to. That you have this place that they needed to start at. Well, here's their altar. Here's Collinsport. Right. This is their place. This is where they want to. This is they've set up camp here. They've established here. So they're going to start here. Then once Jeb actually matures, and if he would have, Jeb's sort of like a precursor to Anakin Skywalker, really. Jeb's so immature that he doesn't follow the rules of the book. In fact, he doesn't want to follow the rules of the book, which is
his
crazy.
love is rough like sand.
Mm-hmm.
It is. So, what were your guys' thoughts on that? Why did Jeb stray from the book so much?
Love. I mean, this is what is the recurring. It is the Ike Turner to the Tina of the Cold Heart. Is love. It's just it batters every villain except for Petofi, and even with Petofi, he's thrown all off by Aristide.
Gordon, what do you think?
Well, I have a similar theory, but a different theory. I think part of it is that Jeb he basically went from 0 to 20 to he went from 0 to Chris Pennock in a matter of presumably weeks in terms of Collinwood time. So he's dealing with adult feelings in a kid's body. But the other is kind of my personal pet theory, which I don't think there's any evidence on the show. It's just stuff I made up. It's headcanon. And that is, I'm wondering if the Leviathans have the ability to see different different timelines, as it were. So if they look at Barnabas and go, okay, well, he's staked in 1795. He's staked in 1897. He dies a poor man. He has kids with Angelique, and that's why they rely on that book so much. It's like they know all the things that could possibly happen, but they also know the best outcome. Because I think in the book it's something like, you need to the person that Jeb has to marry has to come willingly and all that, because they've seen all these potentials. They know the worst case scenario, so they're going to put in the book the best case scenario. So I think you've got an immature Leviathan who doesn't understand anything about love or human emotions at all. He's basically
he's Billy Batson.
Yeah, basically
he's a supernatural evil Billy Batson.
Yeah, and he doesn't have he doesn't have the magic word to change into Shazam. He's just, he's got the sheep coat, and he thinks that makes him look badass. But he's like an 8-year-old, and that's being generous.
What if? Remember, David is given a crystal ball by Bert Devlin. What if the crystal ball was intended for the Leviathan? In a weird way.
I'm sure. I mean, that's fine. The crystal ball never really shows a lot. I mean, it's a kind of mundane. I mean, they might as well give him a rabbit's foot too. But I would love for the crystal ball to do more. I'll tell you, there's another David-ism in all of this that I think has an interesting potential for the series, or for another Dark Shadows series, which I think would be a great thing for us to also talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But didn't David spend some time with the Book of the Leviathan? Because I think Elizabeth had it for a while, and I think it was hanging around the house. If we don't really know what the Book of Leviathan is per se, But what if it's a master guide to this multiverse?
Mhm.
All of these different timelines and all these different possibilities. And what if David knows it? What if this is something that David read and it continues to work with him and, you know, in his subconscious well beyond, and that's one of the reasons why Judah Zachary murders him, because that happens. You know, remember in that episode where, you know, I mean, he just walks up to the kids, and it's in the last episode where the zombies I think 1198, where the, is it 1198? Is where the zombies tear apart Collinwood.
Right.
And I'm pretty certain that he murders the kids in that episode. That's my interpretation anyway. But if David knows all this stuff, what does that do to a guy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially a kid who's been possessed twice by supernatural forces, and we can argue whether they're probably more likely Judah Zachary kind of using David as a pawn, you know. But yeah, that you know, that's gotta mess up a kid.
Yeah. If what something they could take advantage of in a new series is the Book of Leviathan itself, because though we never see what's in the book. You know, that's another thing. If there is this, well, here's this multiverse, and here's what the Leviathans knew from that book, that would be amazing.
Sure.
You know, what's something you guys want to see in the new Dark Shadow series?
Babes.
I'm with him on this. Also, what I'd also love to see is I'd love to see intro credits where it's like a beach with waves crashing, and you hear this do 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 do, and you see like with a theremin, and you see dark shadows across the street. I think we should have that. I think there's a piece of music by some guy named Colbert we could use.
But I would do that. I would have the Ventures do a cover of it, and there would be someone surfing on the wave, you know, crashing there, and Jack Lord gets assigned to Colin.
He's dead. We'd have to use Alex McLaughlin.
CGI Jack Lord.
Oh, you mean deepfake Jack Lord?
Deepfake Jack Lord instead of Tracy. But all seriousness aside, I also want to see the you know, because Joshua, you know, I'm not saying he was in the slave trade, but he did own ships,
right,
in part of the triangle and all of that. And you know, I think he probably got around. I think Jeremiah got around. And what if the actual Collins, the purest Collins bloodline, is found in 1971 Watts at a junkyard, and it's Sanford Collins, and it's Red Fox as Sanford Collins. Fred Sanford moves into Collinwood and takes it over with Lamont and Grady. I'm just saying, Fred Sanford has great wiles. And if you pitted Fred Sanford against Nicholas Blair, Fred Sanford would win. Because he'd fake a heart attack or something. Nicholas isn't ready for that. And then, you know, incapacitate him with, you know, some I Ching daggers or something that he, you know, found that Jonathan Harris is trying to bid on.
Mm-hmm. And what I think is if we move the show up to the 80s, I would love to see the Blue Whale be taken over by a guy named Sam Malone, who's a former baseball player, and he serves as the bartender. And there's like a local woman named Diane Chambers, and there's a little trio going on between Sam, Diane, and Maggie Evans. I think that should happen.
Here's the problem, is that then you get Quentin, played by Leslie Nielsen, who finds out that Maggie is cheating on him with Ted Danson, and so buries them both up to their neck, and they become sea monsters who come back after him.
Yeah, but then they go to the good place and they
The
meet,
Good Place. I knew you were gonna. Yes, of course, The Good Place comes into it.
and then Sam Malone's cousin Becker comes in with, who's
With
like a
Jadzia Dax,
right,
and
definitely.
so you get the Pa Wraiths.
Very, very
Ma
nice.
and Pa Wraith instead of Ma and Pa Kennel.
Mm-hmm. Are you writing this down, Mark Perry? I mean, this is gold. You should
Hey,
be watching this.
Mark is a hell of a guy, and there is a chance. I had a dream that a book was going to come out in late 22 or early 23 called Dark Shadows Daybook Unchained, and it was potentially going to have an introduction by Mark Perry.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
So yeah. The first time, Jewel, that I talked to you, you had called me from prison. You'd been arrested, and no, I'm just kidding. No, because I was there in the cell, and I taught you what a courtesy flush was, and that's how you didn't get shivved, because he didn't know, and it was it was real close. But all seriousness aside, the first time Jewel and I talked, when he had me on, he was reading the day book.
Yep.
And I ran total roughshod, and I forced him to spoil it. I got him to read the last chapter of the day book, because I don't know if you remember the last chapter of the day book, but it's all about what I would do with a new series. So that's there.
Yeah, for those who want to really know what Patrick would put in the new series, it's in the end of the day book. There's, I think, 12 in all, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly. But it's really, really a great read, guys. The Dark Shadows Day book, written by Mr. Patrick McCray, who's sitting right there. I'll say this: I'm a fan of metal, so pardon this. I like the surfer idea of what you're saying, see the waves.
Sure.
But as you're seeing the waves, you hear the guitar sound and you hear Metallica's Call of Cthulhu. And you hear the wind, and then you see the waves crashing, and as it goes up, you see the house. That's something I wouldn't mind, And so I do think that with Dark Shadows, there's so many things they could explore with this. I mean, there's so much. I'm not just talking new characters, because I know that's something we're gonna see in a new series. We're gonna see a ton of new characters, but how are they going to incorporate the new, old, and everything in between? That's gonna be a lot of fun.
Sure. So I think there are two ways to have this, well, maybe three ways to have this discussion. One is trying to outguess Mark Perry. Seriously.
Right.
And that kind of, and that is separate from how, pardon me, how one of us would do a Dark Shadows continuation series.
Right.
Which is separate from doing a Dark Shadows remake series.
Right.
So I think those are three distinct topics. I think they're all worth talking about.
Think of it like this: putting Mr. Perry's work aside, because we don't know what he's doing until there's two basic approaches. We can either do the 1991 revival series approach, which is let's take all the stuff we did back in the day and just reframe it.
Right.
Or you do the 2004 pilot approach, which is, okay, we've got this stuff, but we're going to suggest some really cool directions and not make it like the old series. Because
yes. Well, or there's the continuation, because both of those are different flavors of remake.
Right. Oh, okay.
Okay, so
you see what I mean?
Right. So here's my question. I'll start with Gordon. What would all three of ours continuation be? So Gordon, what would yours where would yours start, we'll say?
I would probably start with the same approach that I know Mark Perry is doing, which is basically do it in modern times, but integrate pieces of the past in very creative ways. So that way you're not, you can assume that like, okay, we're just going to pretend that the show's been on since 1971 up to this point, but we can hint at different pieces of the past. We could do all sorts of, we could create newer stories, but we can also do like the gratuitous, imagine if it's on the CW. You have one teenager talking to another teenager, saying, "Hey, look, my grandmother told me not to hang out with you college people," and teenage angst. The person goes home and is asked, "Have you been hanging out with those college people again?" And the teenager says, "No, Grandma, I didn't." Okay, you go to your room. Camera turns. It's Catherine Lee Scott. Things like that. Or I think you can also create newish kind of mysteries, like if I would have Professor Stokes in it, played by John Noble, with the idea that
who's John Noble?
He was in Fringe. He was a scientist in Fringe. He was Moreland Holmes in Elementary. He speaks with a very broad, except I would have the hint that, he doesn't look like the old Stokes, but something happened in the 70s that he not only changed his appearance, but he hasn't aged a day since. And I think if you do that, because you don't want to just do a quick remake, because you're kind of you're cutting off potential new audience members, but you also want to, the great thing about Dark Shadows is there's no real canon to it. In that, what's happened in the past, but you don't necessarily, you can kind of do, okay, if you do it in the present day, you've got that history to go to, but you don't necessarily have to be like, okay, well, like Star Trek, you'll have people complain about, well, okay, it's on the Enterprise 10 years before Kirk, but the technology is too new. Well, you can do more modern stories now, but you can do nods to the past without worrying about, you don't have to be, you're not changing history, because you can make that the old series can inform it without necessarily doing direct sequels, or, hey, did you get this one? Did you get this one? That's what I mean by not canon.
Right. Patrick, where would your continuation start?
That's a good question. I think the first thing I have to say, I had a little bit of a downer, but it's that I think the story is over, in the best sense, in the way that at the end of Moby Dick is over. It's a huge, wonderful story, and we've told it. As a Dark Shadows fan, I only have one major question, and that is, what does Barnabas do with all of this knowledge of time travel and everything else, knowing that Angelique is good at a certain level, or is certainly savable, and that he's going to come back. He's human. He is shattered, but at some point he's going to have to be galvanized into action, because that's the only resolution that's left undone. And in some ways, the pain of that ambiguity is part of the beauty of the series. That, Barnabas always is going to be a tortured character, and then he gets right up to this point of forgiveness and love and self-understanding, and the rug's ripped out from under him. And are those things enough? Or is he going to get together with Stokes and Quentin and, build an I Ching time staircase 2.0 and try and do something? Or is a crisis going to pull him back or something? Is he going to have to reinfect himself with vampirism so that he has some kind of superheroic edge to deal with these problems? I think that's an inevitable story. So in some ways, we're kind of hurt by having to jump so far into the future, because there are things left untold. So probably just totally self-indulgently, I would start in the present but then through flashbacks or something like that, find out how all of that played out. So that's my first notion. And I almost imagine that there is some mega big bad that they have to deal with that may be Stokes in the future, having amassed all of this information, sort of going completely brainiac, going insane, and that he either has to be saved or taken down because he now, at some point in the far future, is the big bad. And Dark Shadow's characters we have not met yet come back to our present, to just like, Barnabas and Julia went back to 1840, and they were complete strangers to people in 1840. So these characters we don't even know, but who are essentially the heroes of Dark Shadow's 2100, have come back to avert a much larger crisis. And that's what goes on. And so then I would use kind of a time travel conceit, because Dark Shadows does time travel really well, where they're assembling almost an Ocean's 11 of different characters, right before they die or right before they disappear or something like that. And so that's how you're able to get these different people. So that's another thought. I just came up with that. That's a real wacky concept. I think the other thing is that, and this is something Gordon and I have talked about, is that there are chunks of the Dark Shadows story missing that you can absolutely tell. So there's everything between 1795, 1797, and 1840. There's everything from there's what Theodore's generation, which is everything from 1840 to 1897, and then everything from 1897 to the 1940s. So you have these chunks of time that can be explored and filled in without violating canon. You're just telling more of the show. Because let's face it, Elizabeth and Roger, if Roger had grown up with the sort of house that Jameson grew up in, he would be terrified for David. He would not have brought David back under any circumstances. And so what on earth was up with Jameson that he let Roger and Liz be raised in the house? Well, something pretty effective, because Roger and Liz don't seem to have a lot of knowledge of the supernatural, except in kind of rumors of the widows and things like that are in the background. But Roger never sits down and says, "Oh, Jesus Christ, the ghost of Gerard Stiles scared the shit out of me when I was growing up." Or what? No, there's none of that. So clearly Jameson was able to protect them. There's all kinds of stuff like that to fill in those blanks. The geek in me would want to fill in those blanks the way that Strange New Worlds is doing.
Yeah. Really good series, by the way, the new Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Check that out on Paramount Plus. Really good. I think something that Gordon touched on Maggie Evans, and also too, if you're going to have, whether they have a relation to Victoria Winters or not, I don't know, but for me, I would, but also have two, what was so great about the original? It wasn't just Victoria Winters arriving, it was Burt Devlin arriving. It was two different people arriving, two different agendas, really. You had, so have the relation of Victoria Winters arrive, sure, but how about have this kid who loses his dad, who's a police officer, he gets shot, he loses his dad. You come to find out this is the grandson of Maggie Evans. He now has to go live with his grandmother in Collinsport, where he's never been. He's never and he's never really been around her either. And he knows that throughout the years his dad's never really talked about his mother. He doesn't understand why. And as he's meeting not just Maggie for the first time, but other people, your grandmother went to an insane asylum, and he's like, "You're lying." He gets into a fight with people over it. Maybe a Collins kid. Like you're lying, you know. Dark Shadows is a soap opera, you know.
Now, there's a weird question about Maggie Evans because, I think in fandom and even in Big Finishdom, which is a form of fandom, uh, and everything else, I think there's this thought that Maggie and Quentin are going to hook up,
Yeah.
and when they do, Maggie becomes the mistress of Collinwood. Because David's a weirdo. We know that David's going to be, off running a used bookstore in New Orleans or something. And if you're Maggie and if you've grown up seeing all this stuff, tortured the way Maggie was tortured, it raises an interesting question about the nature of Collinwood. We think of Collinwood as this hub that's emanating evil, like this, like a wick.
Right.
And really, when you start to think about it, those ghosts don't wander around Collinsport.
Mm-hmm.
They stay in Collinwood. And what if she realizes that the Faustian bargain, it's kind of like what Liz did accidentally. She's now following in Liz's footsteps of staying kind of cloistered and locked up there. But she's staying locked up there to keep all of the ghosts contained.
Yeah.
And what happens when there is a nephew or somebody like that who has to move in, and this starts to uncork everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For your Gordon, for your continuation, when would you bring Barnabas into play?
I'm going to say I'm not sure, because the idea that I would have for Barnabas is that I'd want to keep him. I'd want there to be references to him being away on a trip, whatever. And if I brought him back, I'd obviously have to do a different actor, and I'd have to suggest, okay, if I'm bringing him in a different actor, why is young British actor playing him rather than Jonathan Frick? Well, the obvious answer is Jonathan Frick is dead. You can't. But it means, okay, was it a case of Eric Lang created, he picked up a book on DNA and bought a CRISPR kit and created a new body for Barnabas? Is it a case of, they found Charles Delaware Tate's magic paints and they painted a new body and they used Dr. Lang's. So I'd want to do that, but I would want it to be I wouldn't want it to be a big, like, okay, Barnabas is always here. I'd want to do it in a way where it like kicks off a storyline and asks questions. So it's not mystery box. It's not like what happened to Barnabas. It's introducing the fact that this is a new guy, what happened to him, and then leading into, okay, here's the backstory.
Gordon, Patrick, when would you bring in Barnabas?
Shot 1, episode 1. And yeah, and it would be obviously his brain in some sort of a new body. The nice thing is that Dark Shadows is, especially 1897, is ripe with body swapping.
Mm-hmm.
So somehow to save his life or something like that, Barnabas is caught on fire or whatever, and Angelique just kind of takes him out of one body and puts him in another, firefighter or something like that. Or here's a good one. You get a very large actor, but a gainly actor. Adam Collins. And Adam Collins, as it turns out, is Barnabas, because Barnabas, upon the death of his body, his soul and brain get transferred completely into Adam. Adam ages very strangely, and he's got a certain, almost like Dick Benson, he's got a plasticity of features, and shows back up at Collinwood, and he knows all of the things to say, and Angelique recognizes him, and it becomes very awkward because Angelique has to introduce him as their son,
Right.
which creates something really weird because let's face it, and that's how you bring Barnabas back. If you want to go deep dish geek, if you just want to go regular, his brain got transferred into whatever Big Finish did.
Right.
But again, don't be stingy with the audience.
Right.
Strange New Worlds, God bless them, have done what I've advised these people to do for years, which is give the audience what they fucking want. And that's not a bad thing. That's not selling out. And so, where was Spock in Strange New Worlds? In episode goddamn 1, in the first shots, you got your Spock. You got your Spock, and it was good. And so I say the same thing for Barnabas. Bring back Barnabas. Put him in there. Give the audience what they want. And then that's a challenge to the writers to, now you got to do something with them.
Yeah.
But I think the move I would avoid would be like, a season's worth of hinting around. Don't do that to the audience. Don't make them, watch you artistically masturbate for, a season. Get to the point. Have him in there. Bring in Quentin. Bring in your big guns. Let people love Dark Shadows.
To Paramount Plus, send the checks to Patrick McCray. Like, seriously. But I'm going to give a huge shout out to another writer, John Philip Betancourt, who wrote The Return of Dark Shadows. He had brought Barnabas back through time travel. He had made where Angelique and Barnabas did have a daughter, and Barnabas gave her up for adoption, and the girl went back in time because by the time she grew up, it was the future. Barnabas had died. So she goes back in time to pull him into the future and where he's still a vampire. And it's a hell of a concept the way he does it. Now, that's not the way I would do it, but it's really...
Well, because of literature, you can get away with anything because it's all,
right,
up here.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It was really smart and a really cool idea for people who want to check that out. That link will be in the description box too. But it's a really neat concept. What I would do, again, if you're going to have new characters, to me, the one person Julia would have trusted would have been either A, Willie Loomis, or B, Quentin Collins. So
what a statement.
Yeah. If you're stuck choosing between Quentin Collins and Willie Loomis, you've made some really poor life decisions.
I mean, Joel, you're right. You're absolutely right. But what does that say about the Dark Shadows universe that these are your... Wow.
Well, listen. Julia, who's in love with Barnabas, who tries to she's made some pretty poor life choices too. So have Quentin living in Collinsport under a different name. He's done it before. Only this time,
it's very Man from Earth kind of thing.
Only this time he's not a writer. He owns a photography studio, and he's going around taking pictures of the Collins family. He's spying on them.
I'm sure he's taking lots of pictures.
And right,
lots of pictures they don't always know about.
Right, and you wouldn't know it was him. But the one Collins kid, keeps telling the kid who moved into town, "I keep seeing this guy taking pictures of me and my family," and they catch him doing it. So they chase him through town. He loses them, but he sees something happen with the kids. So what's he do?
Does he drive a white van? Continue.
Does he drive a white van? No, he doesn't drive a white van. Maybe navy blue.
Does he hang out with Bob Crane?
He may. He may. He may. He may hang out with Bob Crane. Who knows?
Bob he wants the enchanted tripod back. If you hit someone with the tripod, they get the spirit of Bob Crane in them. This is horrible. This is just the most...
I know that was in bad taste. That was in bad taste.
That was the worst taste I've ever... But so was everything about Bob Crane.
Yeah.
So...
See, I don't know if I would...
nothing.
Well, see, I think for what Patrick said about Barnabas, I would do for Quentin. Have him in the first shot. and then make them, kind of say, okay, either find a really young lookalike for David Selby, or say, hey, use David Selby, and have a one line about, okay, the enchanted painting, something happened, it no longer works.
Right.
Well, here's the thing: is that you have a protege or a second or third protege, maybe just Maggie Evans, who is able to do what Sam Evans did
Right.
and touch up the painting as it goes along.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's allowing Quentin to appear to age, because she can always do the equivalent of Photoshop and just smooth over those wrinkles when it's time.
Mm-hmm.
What if Carolyn has because there were Sam Hall wrote that Carolyn got obsessed with the occult. What if she did, and she was collecting things from the occult, and she ends up with the hand of Count Patofe as a part of her collection, and she takes it and has a painter get those type of powers the way Charles Delaware Tate did? That could be something too.
Mm-hmm.
There's
I
a
want to
lot.
know how he lost the hand again. The hand was reattached when
Yeah, it was. I'm sort
we
of
met him.
I'm sort of wondering, like, too, I think Patofe faked his death in order for his body to sort of dissipate, to throw the gypsies off.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
Patofe's
Come
not
on.
dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because basically he pulled a move that the Shadow would pull. I'll fake my death just to trick you.
I think for me, and I mean this with no camp at all, the more Patofe you can put in this thing, the better.
Yeah.
And I have just a very deep instinct about Count Patofe, and it's this. I think over his very long lifetime, he has gone back and forth between good and evil many times. It depends on his mood. It depends on what's happened. Because I can easily see Patofe being a very impish, puckish good guy, and that he and Quentin are best friends. That there is a strange connection there that that is, I think, I've always thought very profound. I don't know why I respond to Count Patofe the way I do. I have this theory about certain characters, that the artists who initially create them create something so deeply resonant that although they germinate the idea, they don't create the ultimate form of it. I would say Dracula's like that. I think Dracula's a pretty bad book, but it's a great character who had a transforming life way beyond anything Bram Stoker imagined. I think Sherlock Holmes is like that. He has had a life much larger and more expansive than this. And I think Count Patofe is one of television's great originals. Is right up there with Spock and Kramer in terms of just these literary characters who really never existed before. He's part Falstaff and he's part Doctor Strange, and you've got to anchor it on Patofe as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What if when he comes into the future, he's found a way to control the hand again? Because he would have had it on long enough, right, by this point in time. Because I think that's the biggest issue with Patofe in 1897. It's been off of him for so long because the gypsies had it. He's lost really the will to control it. And really the hand has a mind of its own anyway.
Sure.
So by this time, by the future, he has control of it. So maybe he can either grab somebody and switch bodies with them, hand and all, or just take their youth from them. We don't know what type of powers yet.
Well, there's another idea in that, which is that really the hand was Patofe.
Yeah.
That that the Victor Finn Gibbons actually is Victor Finn Gibbons. and that he has certain Potofi-like qualities, but he becomes the full Potofi when the hand goes on, which means that when Victor Finn Gibbons is killed and the hand is severed, the hand doesn't burn. Like, clearly it's withered and strange, but the hand gets attached to someone else, and it's like the symbiote on DS9. This is the new Potofi.
Right.
Yeah, then you should always ask for the full Potofi. No matter what.
I often do.
Anyone who can't give you the full Potofi, don't hang with them.
It's at the same time that I go into certain bars in San Francisco and order a bald Thayer in the back room.
Okay, so for you guys' continuation, how many of the original cast members would you want to bring back? All of them?
Oh,
Well,
that's a very delicate question because of their age. Gordon, what do you think?
I think if you can find, I think there's some where you could easily slot them as your leads. So like Catherine Lee Scott, Laura Parker.
Yeah.
I mean, she's still, David Selby. I think for the supporting cast, I'd want to use them strategically because I wouldn't want to do like, hey, here's a Roger Davis cameo just for the sake of it. Like, give them. Dark Shadows has always been good at giving actors good parts, and they're not always the and I would want the part to be worthy of the actor rather than you don't want to do a Star Trek The Next Generation gratuitous DeForest Kelly cameo necessarily, because it's you want to give them something meaty, even if it's only for like an episode or two, but you give them something where they can latch onto it and make it their own.
I mean, Joel, one of the dangerous things about that discussion is that, with the exception of 2 or 3 actors, no names, please. I suspect the actors would be the first to kind of tell you this. It's hard to tell who's going to be around by the time this thing goes to shoot. I think one of the reasons that we haven't had another Dark Shadows festival is that a lot of them passed away. I mean, even since the Dark Shadows festival, the last one, there have been a number who passed away, and the idea that there's a point where you retire, and I just personally have the feeling that there are several actors who do not want to go to New York again and sit there, and say it's a zoo, it's so that's a tough question, and it's a sad question because I don't want to say, well, so-and-so's probably going to be dead by then. What a terrible thing. But when you reach a certain age, statistically, that's a reality you live with every day.
Yeah.
It's a downer.
I think for the most part, you don't have to have all the original actors there. I think the one thing Dark Shadows has always done so greatly is build the characters up through portraits. Have a portrait of Carolyn. Have a portrait of Elizabeth. Right. Have a portrait of Elizabeth. Have a portrait of David.
And pay their families the royalties enough so that you get the actual images.
Right.
So that there is a portrait of
That's
Louis
what
Edmonds.
Yep. That's what I was just going to say too. Like, make sure you pay the families, actors, and their families in general, so you get that image. Because I'll give a great example. I hate in movies when they just use set photos of an actor, and it's a set photo. It's from a set of another movie. Like, for example, in Halloween H2O, they used Donald Pleasance's photo from another Halloween movie. It's like, why could you not pick up the phone, contact that man's family who are still alive, and get a photo?
Hollywood is so cheap.
You know what I mean?
Hollywood is so. I mean, we talked about this last week or a couple of weeks ago about, why was Tom Paris not Nick Locarno? Because Paramount would have to pay the writer of that episode about the Valiant a little bit of money every time Nick Locarno is mentioned. unless they made a deal with the writer and just paid him off, which is probably what they would do. It's not like Paramount's out there with a cup, on the sidewalk begging for money, having to have a Kickstarter so they can have a new Star Trek series. Come on.
Right. It's like Pony Up.
Pay these people some money.
Right. Pony. It's something I've talked about too with the Seaview Terrace. Like, I could see the producers of the new series going out and actually buying the Seaview Terrace or renting it at least for some shots. Why not?
Well, CGI, you can really recreate those things exactly. So you don't have to shoot everything at Greystone.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, or if you're going to really do the research, go to Seaview Terrace, but like take photos and get a sense of the actual rooms of the place, so that like when you're dealing with a soap opera, it looks like this grand thing, but when you think about the actual sets and the actual size of facilities, they were really small. Like if you can also use technology, because I know a lot of the Star Wars series are using this. Those are all shot on sound stages. What they have are these big like screens that surround them, that they project the scenery behind them. That would be actually cool to give Collinwood a sense of actual space and warmth. And you don't have to make the rooms gigantic, but you want to make sure that you create the right amount of atmosphere.
So here's a thought, and this would be a great way to have guns and butter with this, because one of my things, because I have sort of advice essentially to Mark Perry about things I think are important to have in a new Dark Shadow series. And one of the things I say is to recreate the sets meticulously. I think down to all of the olive drabs and those blue candles and everything else, because that's Dark Shadows. That look and that feel. That's why the movies just don't feel like it. They're cold and so on. But it's a big, well-shaped one. Imagine that it starts out and it feels like you're on the sets to Dark Shadows. I mean, the camera, is a little different, but it really it looks like, man, I'm there at Cy Tomashov. It's a set. And then when David or somebody goes upstairs, the camera, which has looked like it's been doing its 3-camera setup, suddenly is over his shoulder, and you're going down the hallways, and suddenly you're into rooms that you just never saw, that were always there, like the ballroom and all this other stuff that Collinwood would have. And so that's how you integrate the new sets in, and they are much grander. And in fact, they're so grand that the family, when it's just like the 3 of them in the house, chose the smaller, more intimate places. That the entrance that they use is not the grand entrance to Collinwood. It's a side entrance. It's to a more intimate part of the house, because that's what they're living in. Hello, Lincoln. Stop that. But that I think you could have those things.
Yeah. What do you think, Gordon?
Now, I'm with Patrick on this. I mean, like get a sense of what the scope of the rooms in the Seaview Terrace are, but add that sense of you're on the set. And I think opening up different rooms gives you the sense of, you could think of really cool, scary set pieces. Like imagine going into, say, we hear about the ball, we go to the front door of Collinwood, the real front door in Patrick's model, and it's boarded up. And you see all sorts of weapons laid out around. What the hell happened? And what prompted, and I know there's probably a line in the 1795 storyline, but what really prompted the building of Collinwood when you already had the old house?
Right.
I know part of it was that, the whole Barnabas and Josette marriage, but really, if you've got a house, where are you going to build another bigger one?
I've wondered the same thing.
See, and that's where you go.
Yeah.
Like, what was the sense of another house when you already had one big one?
Yeah, because it's not like, going with what's on the show. The whole point of Josette marrying Barnabas was a financial deal.
Right.
It was, there was love, but it's more. Yet they're moving from the old house into this new grand mansion that was built. Now the excuse is, we're going to give that house to Barnabas and Josette. However, why are you building this grand, bigger house when you obviously can't afford to, even with 1795 money, when you already have a house there? And you've got, we're assuming even though the old house is smaller, it's still got to be a pretty darn good size. So why are you building a new mansion? And that leads to the introduction, that things we spoke about, and this happened, I'm not sure if we said it on air or here, but maybe there was something that the old house, that the new house was built over to keep something in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something Patrick brought up in one of our previous videos too, was Joshua Collins a member of the Leviathan? That's something our buddy Patrick brought up many times. So,
yeah. That my thought was that he was doing something with the Leviathans, and that's why the first house is so near the altar, and that's why Collinwood is built. It's what if it's built around the parallel time room, and that is connected to, spiritually, ley lines or something like that, the altar, and that all of this is ultimately a chamber for the coming of Jeb. It's Jeb's command base that he was supposed to have for the great Leviathan takeover. And the house had to have certain dimensions to it and all of that, kind of an Alan Moore conspiracy type drawing of, my God, if you connect all these different rooms, you get this bizarre shape and so on.
I could be mistaken about this, but even with when the great house is being built, isn't it a bit of ahead of schedule during the Victoria comes back?
It's finished early. I mean, because they rushed the family into it, before it's really finished. I think that's my recollection of it.
Right.
And I think there's an interesting thought of, what if there were parts of that house that were never quite finished, and that gives it almost a Sarah Winchester quality.
Yeah. I do think that the thing too is with the old house and the great house, everybody, to Gordon's point, everybody was already living in the old house too. Like everybody was in there, servants, the whole family could fit in there. So when they go and build this other house, I'm sort of wondering too, like whether Joshua was a Leviathan or not. Did they sort of know about not just where to build the house, but how to specifically build it so they could have those rooms that went into the parallel time? That's another thing too. Who would you gentlemen pick to score your Dark Shadows?
That's a very good question. I would get it to sound like Robert Colbert. I mean, as much as possible. I think, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd want it as close to Colbert's score, and it has to be. The great thing about his scores is that he knows how to. He has a similar quality to Dudley Simpson on Doctor Who. He knows how to underscore dramatic moments without overdoing it. And he also does diverse pieces of music. I mean, Josette's theme is has a much different effect than, say, Quentin's theme. Than the, as much as the usual end of scene, with that bum bum bum.
Yeah.
And I think
agree.
you need that. You don't need.
I have
You
to
don't.
I have to step away for just a moment. Pardon.
Okay, no
Keep
problem.
keep the fun going.
Okay.
We'll do.
I think I would either like to see John Carpenter or his son Cody do it.
Yeah, that would be a good choice because I know Carpenter scores are always. They never. Let me tell you who you shouldn't hire. You should not hire John Williams.
Okay.
That's that because you don't need big orchestral. You need, and Carpenter has that feel like that kind of, it gets under your skin like
Yeah.
Colbert's does a little bit. And so you want something that is very much like, you don't want John Williams, you don't want Mike Post.
Right.
And I'm sure that if Patrick were in the room with us and he hadn't had to step away, my saying Mike Post would be freaking him out right now. Let's see, who do you not get? But no, yeah, John Carpenter, I would say, is probably the ideal. I'm
Right.
not too up on my, the only other person I can think of, and I'm not even sure if he's still alive, is Enrico Morricone. But
He's
that's
not. He passed away.
okay.
recently.
So okay, well, forget that suggestion then.
No, but he is a great suggestion. Again, I've listened to his, not just his westerns. He did work with John Carpenter on The Thing.
Mm-hmm.
That was really well scored.
Yeah, he also did the score for The Untouchables, which is one of
Yeah.
my favorite scores. Yeah, you want something that punctuates the tension. And Dudley Simpson did a lot of this with his work on Doctor Who, where he used some very exotic instruments. And it's not the kind of not the kind of music that you would put headphones on to listen to, but
Right.
it somehow led you. It guided you through the scene. It didn't tell you to be scared, but
Right.
it helped add to that atmosphere. And I think that's what you need for a new Dark Shadows.
Yeah, definitely. I do think. Who did I forget. The guy who did the score for the 2012 movie. God, I'm blanking on his name. I thought he provided a good score.
Did Danny Elfman do that one?
Yeah, right. Yes, Danny Elfman. Thank you. So I wouldn't mind seeing Danny Elfman do the series because I do think he could deliver that one too.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, I think the challenge too would be with a series like this. I think part of it would depend on where is it going to be showing. So if we're assuming, let's assume CW, they're probably not going to give them a budget they might afford Cody Carpenter, but not John Carpenter.
Right.
For example. If you're going streaming, depending on the channel, like I'm not sure the fact that Netflix has done all sorts of cuts and they're losing viewers. I'm not sure that's your prime. That's your prime target. But I do think there's if you spend a little money on it, I would say get your John Carpenter, get someone who, again, if Dudley Simpson were still alive, I'd say hire him, but he passed years ago. But yeah, you need that because something like this, you could really cause a train wreck if it's not scored right.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you who I loved how Val Lewton scored his films too. Mm-hmm. I know that's way back. Everybody there is probably gone, but I do think Dark Shadows, its music and the way they would set up their music, it was a character all itself.
Mm-hmm. And that's the great thing too. For a soap opera, because most soap operas at that time, it was kind of that cheesy little deedly dee, and they used it very sparingly on Dark Shadows.
I'm sure you have, did you ever hear like how Robert Colbert he took Quentin's theme from the original series, and then when he used it on Night of Dark Shadows, he really turned it up a bit. He spiced it up a bit, and it sounded even creepier.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the great thing too, is Quentin's theme is the same piece of music as Pansy Faye's song. Right. And one, it's this nice little music hall, jaunty little saucy thing. And Quentin's theme, without the narration, is just, it has that charm, but it's the way that the violins played, it just it really sends shivers up my spine. And it's not due to the quality of playing either.
I think one of the best things too is I've talked about how the music is a character on it all its own too. When Selby turns and starts walking up the hall, then the music hits. It's like, oh crap! It gives you goosebumps. You know, beautifully done, just perfect. So let's see.
So just
Trying to get some
just
sound here. I can barely hear you.
Sorry.
no
It's not
problem.
your fault. It's the miracle of technology.
There-
What's that sign? But somehow there is. Do either of you have iPhones? Are you doing this on those? Because I'm trying to get like actual like the speakers, like the speakerphone thing to play, and I can't. I know this is fascinating for people, listening in as I'm poking around at this thing like a chimp. But hang on. Maybe. What if I do this? Oh, hey. Now say something.
Hello.
Oh yeah.
We think Mike
Now-
Post should score Dark Shadows.
That'd be great. I would love that. He wrote a good tune. Yeah. I mean, if you're asking me if I had to get another composer, I say I don't know who modern composers are. But I get somebody like Ennio Morricone.
He passed away, actually.
Yeah, because I
Yeah, I
suggested
know.
that.
I don't know if I could get anybody.
Anybody? Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, I'd opt for Dudley Simpson, but have them rotate. Dudley Simpson one episode, Enrico another.
What about Vic Mizzy? That's the guy who wrote the music to Addams Family and to Green Acres, the fuzzy guitar.
I said this to Gordon. I really enjoyed Danny Elfman's score for the 2012 movie. If nothing else, Danny Elfman did a good job. And I do think, again, depending on the budget, like Gordon brought up, I do think it's going to be depending on who you hire. I would love for them to get John Carpenter and his son Cody to do it.
Yeah, there's a Bear McCreary or McCready. He did the music to Battlestar Galactica, the new one.
Yeah.
Some very melodic pieces in that, very evocative. Maybe him, or honestly, whoever wrote the music to the video game Journey, get them. My God, have you ever heard that? I think some of the best composing done nowadays is done for video games. I really do.
Hey, why not go one step further? Why not just hire the band Journey to do your soundtrack?
Toto, get Toto. If they did Dune, they can do this.
Well, here, actually, I'll tell you a really good soundtrack too is the Silent Hill games, Silent Hill 1 and 2. If you ever played them, very, very good. But I do think that's the thing too. The music is a character itself, and that's something whoever you get to score it really has to fit that style of creepiness and momentum with the series. Who would, I don't know modern set designers, so I can't say who would you pick as a set designer.
I know who I would. I know who I would pick.
Who would you pick?
There's a set designer named John Iacovelli, who John is a magnificent scenic designer, very good with creating livable spaces, but with a sense of grandeur. He did the Babylon 5 sets, and John, I think, also worked as an intern for Cy Tomashoff or with Cy Tomashoff at some point. And I think it was like on Santa Barbara or something, because Cy kept working forever. So it was on something. And I think it was one of those. So yeah, I would John is the guy I would hire.
Who would you get, Gordon? I'd have to go with Patrick because I don't know too many set designers. And I just watched there's a YouTuber named Rowan J. Coleman who does these little retrospectives.
Yeah.
And he did one on Babylon 5. It was his latest one, and he talked about how Babylon 5 sets were made so that they could essentially you could change them really quickly, so that you can do, you just move some stuff around and it goes from like command center to dining center, that they could do a lot of turnovers. And I think with a show like Dark Shadows, if you're doing if we're assuming we're doing like your traditional sets, we do them like the soap opera, you want to be able to, especially if you're doing like a production where, yes, you've got a lot more money than your soap opera, but you also want to be able to, if you're going to a different room of the Collins that looks like the Collins home, you want to be able to switch some walls around, maybe get rid of the stairs, throw in like a nice chandelier. Okay, boom, there's your dining area, the grand dining hall, or the library that nobody visits, or Roger's secret stash of booze, the Collins wine cellar.
The difference, Gordon, the difference that I would point out is that on Babylon 5, because I worked in the art department on Babylon 5, and on Babylon 5, everything was driven by budget.
Right.
And by tremendous budget constraints. I mean, we shot that for a lot less than people think. And it was in an old, I think, like water pick factory or something,
Mm-hmm.
And so, those choices were brilliant, and they were driven by necessity. I have a strong feeling that if John had been given Paramount money, he would not have had to make all of the same choices that he made. And so I'm all for that kind of economy, but only if it really serves the show creatively.
Right. But also keep in mind, they may be getting more like CW money, theoretically, or I don't know. Yeah, I don't know who has the rights, or like if they have Warner Brothers money, they don't have to worry. Well, actually, they might have to worry about it. But it's focusing on you meet the budget, but you also meet the dramatic needs.
They do have Warner Brothers money, as far as I know. But
Mm-hmm.
That leads me to a great question for you guys. So for your continuation, what studio would you want to have it?
Oh boy.
That's tricky, because it's not always, it's not like I've got this project. Usually it's no longer a case of I've got a project, I'm going to go develop it at a studio.
Right.
It's usually there's like a working relationship. It would be nice if to say, like, I could shoot for the moon and say I'd like to do Amazon money, but there are issues there in terms of release and exposure. Ideally, I would love to have it on. I'll say I'd like to have it at one of the major studios: your Paramount, your Sony, your Warner Brothers, a place where you can get enough to do it through. If, say, Blumhouse wanted to sponsor it, I wouldn't argue.
Right.
It's hard too, because it's not how at least to my understanding, it's not how the business works. It's not like, hey, I've got this thing, you need to do it. It's usually a little bit more labyrinth than that.
Yeah, Jewel, in the old days, the old days, the studios all had pretty distinctive identities.
Right.
So you were going to get Crime Pictures at Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
You're going to get, your big musicals and things like that at MGM. And that all, Universal was, kind of weird bottom of the barrel stuff. But then Monsters, and they had that fantastic backlot and so on, and Abbott and Costello, whatever. But nowadays, a lot of these studios are just more involved in distribution.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think the ideal producing body is going to be one that is going to fund as lavishly as they will not interfere.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
big thing. I think the saving grace is that with a property like this, for one thing, there was something that happened in movies a little while ago, which is we lost the mid-range budget movie. That died. That disappeared. And everything that made it to the screen pretty much was a blockbuster of one sort or another. And I mean, when I look at TV now, like when I look at Strange New Worlds, the sets are eye-popping.
Yeah.
And they're beyond what we used to think of as cinema quality, and we take them for granted. We expect them. We demand them. This is just natural. So my theory is that whatever is done is going to be done very well funded. I don't see a low Dark Shadows. Now, I think the scenic life is very important to the show. And the thing that every designer, starting with House of Dark Shadows, which is a movie I hate, going onward, has gotten the same fucking thing wrong about Collinwood that Cy Tomashoff got right about Collinwood when he did it. And that is, he used situational judo. He took the limitations of that studio and turned them to his advantage. And if you look at that house, if you look at Collinwood, if you look at the interior, even in the old house, there is a warmth. There's a visual warmth that does have a quality of grandeur, but it always has, especially when they went to color, a quality of home, a quality of a strange comfort, of a thing that you want to defend, even an oddly operatic intimacy. So in terms of the visual life, I think that's so incredibly critical.
I think something Cy doesn't get enough credit for too with the sets is when you shoot them, even when before you hear the music or anybody talking, you feel like you're there. That's something you don't really get with House of Dark Shadows and even Night of Dark Shadows. To me, you more get that feeling with the show.
Yeah, I think with the show, the sets actually looked lived in.
Right.
And that is, to Patrick's point, using the studio to the best of its ability. And even though, yes, it may have been more ornate in our heads, what they did on screen looks pretty impressive. I mean, it looks like the kind of place where you could pop into a time machine, go back to 68, 69. That would be your picture of what a mansion would look like.
It is impressive. Would you want to live there? Could you imagine feeling comfortable?
I didn't say I'd want to live there. I'm just saying it looks lived in.
Oh, sure. But yes, it does. Yes, it does. My issue with the subsequent ones, including the Warner Brothers one from
the other ones are too cold. It's like, okay, we've got a big mansion, let's just shoot it. They're not mansions you would live in.
Right.
Would you be excited to have a Mego playset of one of those? And the answer is no. Yeah, but would you want a Mego playset of Collinwood? Fuck yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever seen the catalogs where they have the Amityville house, and I forget who does it, but I'm thinking, where's Collinwood? We need something like that with Collinwood.
There have been some models of Seaview Terrace that have been released. There was one a few years ago, and there's a really fine art print that I have not scanned and will not send you a high resolution copy of later. That's a beautiful, just one architectural elevation of the side of Collinwood.
Right.
So,
guys, is there anything you want to add before we go?
Shop smart, shop smart.
That's right. Gordon, is there anything you want to add?
Nope. Can't think of anything.
Okay. To check out Gordon's Amazon page, link will be in the description box. To go buy the Dark Shadows Daybook, link will be in the description box to Amazon. To go check out John Philip Betancourt's Return to Dark Shadows, link will be in the description box. For the great Patrick McCray,
I'm going to be at Wonderfest in Louisville next week. And at this time next week, I'm going to be at Wonderfest. And I'm going to put up ads with a QR code. I'm serious about this, where you can contact me at Wonderfest and tell me what your location is. And I will hand deliver a day book to you for money at the convention. I will. You tell me where you are. I will show up with the day book.
Yeah, and remember, that's a day book, not a sandwich.
That's right.
He will not deliver sandwiches to you.
But
That's
I'll
not
do
his
it.
job.
They want to pay me? Yes. Yeah. There'll be a bite taken out of every one, to make sure it's not poisoned.
it's just as enjoyable as a sandwich. Trust me. Great. It's a great read.
Oh, I have a friend of mine, and we'll show up and help you make a sandwich.
I bet. For Patrick, the awesome Patrick McCray. For Gordon, guys, you guys are awesome. You guys are a blast. Thank you guys both. Have a great night, guys.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Welcome to Nightmare Country, folks.
Yeah, right. Bye. Oh my